beat up citizens, even killing citizens on the street. Why should we allow sanctions against our people to continue? Sanctions against our people when we brutalize and beat up citizens, even killing citizens on the streets.
Good evening and welcome to this edition of the Free Talk, brought to you in proud partnership with the Frederick Norman Foundation and Heart and Soul TV and Radio. And as usual, I am your host, Dara Blessed Mhlanga. Now on this platform, the Free Talk, we discuss everything socio-political and economical. We answer the critical question for everyone, so what? In this edition, we are answering the question, the Special Rapporteur report by Professor Anne Dohan. So what about that report? We are getting into it and we are going to give you the meat, the criticism and the appreciation of that report, which said that there was need to lift the sanctions imposed allegedly illegally on Zimbabwe by the EU, the UK and the United States of America and a number of its allies. Now, in studio, I have a panel from political parties, civil society, to discuss this report. I'll allow my panelists as a way of getting into the show to introduce themselves individually and give me what they think about the report that was produced by the UN. I'll start with you at the far left. Comrade Senengam, you could kindly introduce yourself, who you represent, and your thoughts about the report.
Thank you, Dara. I am Godfrey Senengam, the National Coordinator of the Front for Economic Emancipation in Zimbabwe, FEEZ in short, which is a new political party announced to the whole of Zimbabwe on the 31st of August and to be launched this Saturday on the 6th of November. So our take as the Front for Economic Emancipation in Zimbabwe on the report by the UN Rapporteur, one is that she made key observations in terms of the situation prevailing on the ground in regards to the effects of the sanctions that were imposed on Zimbabwe by the EU and also by the United States of America. One, the first key observation that the UN Rapporteur made was the illegality of the sanctions that were imposed on Zimbabwe, because no country has a legal right to impose economic sanctions against another country. It is only the duty and the prerogative of the United Nations to do so. So in that regard, the sanctions or whatever that they choose to call them are illegal in terms of international law, because we have two sets of sanctions, those imposed on individuals and those imposed on critical institutions of the state. So if you look at the report, the rapporteur was very clear, however, in mentioning that before the imposition of sanctions, there were other social economic problems that were already there before even sanctions were imposed on Zimbabwe. So what that then means is also that we cannot wholly blame the sanctions for the problems that we continue to have. We have issues to do with misgovernance, we have issues to do with corruption, misplaced priorities and mismanagement of national resources. But we cannot run away from the fact that the sanctions do exist, and to some extent they have an effect on the problem that we have, but not that they are wholly responsible for the situation that we have.
Beautiful. I'll come to you.
All right. My name is Salingoni. I'm the co-founder and spokesperson for Broad Alliance Against Sanctions. We are quite happy as an organization with the report which was produced by the UN Rapporteur. One, because she highlighted that these sanctions, these ruinous sanctions, have a huge impact on the ordinary citizens of Zimbabwe, which is very true because it is us, the ordinary citizens, who have suffered a lot from these illegal sanctions. And secondly, the issue that my brother has said of the illegality of these sanctions, because we have countries like USA and EU who have tried to justify that these sanctions should continue being there, yet these sanctions are actually illegal in nature. And three, the report, we took it as a very good report. Why? Because whether she came or she didn't come, we all know that the United Nations already has a law which says that no country has the right to sanction any other country, any independent country. And Zimbabwe is an independent and sovereign nation. So they should let us deal with our own issues using our homegrown solutions as Zimbabweans. If we have our own issues to do with the human rights, to do with democracy, to do with the rule of law and all the other issues that they cite, we should be able to sit down and table our issues as Zimbabweans and come out with solutions without their interference. So in short, I would say her report was very good. And considering that she has a doctorate degree in international law, sanctions and things like that, she's done a lot of extensive research in that area. We can't expect her to write a biased report.
Amazing. I'll come to you.
Okay. My name is Linda Tungere Masarira, the founding president of Labour Economy South African Democrats, a wholly homegrown party with a pan-Afghanist approach. And from our perspective, the UN Rapporteur's report was very fair and quite factual in regards to how these sanctions have impacted on the livelihoods of ordinary citizens in this country. The conversation about sanctions didn't start yesterday. It didn't start when the UN Rapporteur came. The issue to do with sanctions started in 1993 at the Vienna Convention, where all nations that were represented there agreed that sanctions are a crime against humanity, that sanctions are illegal. And when sanctions were imposed in 2001, they were already illegal. And it is unfortunate that my erstwhile comrades here actually ululated and kept on calling for sanctions to be increased against Zimbabwe, yet they are already illegal. We should understand that sanctions deprive the enjoyment, total enjoyment of human rights for the countries, in the countries that they are imposed. They curtail international trade that allow development in the nations that they are imposed. Sanctions also affect economic development. Sanctions stop free trade. And sanctions are a form of economic warfare. That is the aspect that Zimbabweans don't understand, because we have been used to the propaganda that is spread on social media by organized people who want to set a certain narrative about what these sanctions are about. At the end of the day, if we don't have an appreciation of how sanctions played a major role to the economic turmoil that we had since 2005 until 2008, when we didn't even have a dollar to use in this country, Those were the effects of sanctions. And we should start having an honest conversation on how sanctions have affected each and every Zimbabwean. We can no longer pretend and say sanctions don't affect us. Sanctions are targeted. Because if they were targeted, they definitely missed the target. Because those who are on the sanctions list are the wealthiest people in Zimbabwe, live flamboyant lifestyles, can go and get treated anywhere in the world. But you and me, if we get sick right now, we might die, failing to access proper healthcare services. So at the end of the day, we need to have an honest conversation, appreciate the report, the preliminary report by the UN Rapporteur, and say which way forward is Zimbabwe. We need to stop having this egoistic approach, especially to the politicians in this country, that says sanctions should be increased, sanctions should not be removed, sanctions should be... Every progressive Zimbabwean should be speaking with one voice that sanctions should be removed, and then we deal with other underlying factors like corruption, misgovernance, etc., etc. But at least when we have an opportunity to trade freely with all countries in the world.
Amazing. I'll allow you.
Yeah, my name is Jacob Mafume. I'm the Secretary for Local Government for the MDC-Alliance. Firstly, our first impressions of the report is that it was written. Our delegation went there. As they were speaking with the rapporteur, they realized that the report had already been released. So our inputs were not carried into that preliminary report. Our participation in her processes turned out to be dishonest, turned out not to be consultative, turned out to be pulling wool over our eyes. And fortunately, there is a God always who looks after his people. The people who she had given the duty, whether of writing the preliminary report for her, or editing it, or whatever. The Lord works in mysterious ways. That report came out prematurely, while our delegation was talking to her. And they, up to now, there's been no explanation as to why a report which was supposed to incorporate our contributions came out. So from the start of that process, one knows that, one gets a sense that this was not an ethical report. The consultation was first-serving, and certainly we as the MDC-Alliance were not completely consulted or genuinely consulted in this process, which is very unfortunate. Then secondly, when you say something is illegal, normally you mention the law that makes it illegal. You see, illegality is not parroting statements from I don't know where, or from a hymn book, or from songs that are being sung by someone else. If you say this is illegal, in terms of which law and by which law? Were sanctions against the apartheid government of South Africa illegal? I don't believe so. Were sanctions against Rhodesia then, which were advocated for by people like Edson Zobo and so forth publicly, illegal? I don't think so. Were sanctions against the Rwandese government, which was committing genocide, illegal? I don't think so. So when you say something is illegal, one has to say in terms of which law and how so. What I understand, and when you say a country cannot sanction another country, the beginning of this year, or just this month or last month, we had trucks piling up at the, what you call it, at the Beitbridge border post because of unilateral measures that had been taken by our government that they should pay a certain amount of money. And the trucks were piling up right up to Messina until the South African government ended up complaining and say, hey, what's happening? This is a unilateral measure by the government of Zimbabwe to say if you are going to pass into Zimbabwe, you are going to pay this law. The point I'm trying to make is that if you want to play with other nations, you have to play by the rules. Other nations are not allowed by their parliaments to work with the government that beats up journalists. Other countries are not allowed by their own parliaments to work with governments that imprison opposition actors simply for opposing. Other governments are not allowed to work with governments that steal from their own people. other parliaments do not allow their governments to work with governments that violate basic human rights, beat up people, impede people, block the media, and so forth. And one of the things that was done by Sibusisi Omoyo before he passed away was to develop his aspect of the national in the NDS-1, what he called image building, international engagement, and re-engagement. Now, it's a whole chapter which writes what needs to be done for international re-engagement. This was adopted in NDS-1, it was adopted in NDS-2. And, well, may his soul rest in peace. He was honest about it. He mentioned what led to the isolation of Zimbabwe. And he chronicles what needs to be done to get Zimbabwe back into the international community of nations. And it looks like the current government, they buried his good ideas with him. He says, one, there are many aspects of the international isolation and the re-engagement that needs to be done. Part of it was caused by this own government. He says, and he squarely puts the blame on the government policy and lack of clarity on many issues. He says we withdrew from the Commonwealth on our own. What they should do is join the Commonwealth. He says we refused to pay arrears to the IMF. What we must do is develop a clear plan of paying the arrears. We did not implement the Constitution. He says in NDS-1, and for the readers, it's chapter 10 of the National Development Strategy. I'm not saying it. It's ZANU-PF's minister who is saying what needs to be done to re-engage. Nowhere in the international, no way, I'm reading it, I have it here. So where does this policy comes from of illegality? And which law, when you say something is illegal, which law? Unless ZANU-PF is now departing from an adopted national development strategy, then it's something else. But we can only judge them by what they write. And what they write is nowhere near what my colleagues have been parroting from songs by some of these artists which they sing in this, certainly not government policy, according to what has been written under both the development strategies of the government.
Amazing. Now that we have had your opening remarks, I would want then to get into the meat and gist of things as to what are the issues. Now, you spoke about that the sanctions are illegal, as said by Doan. And you also said that before the sanctions came, we had our problems, our economic problems. Now, let us balance this, because it now appears as if the sanctions are the root cause of all the problems that we have.
Okay, thank you, Dara. I think what I would want to say first is, you see, you can afford to lie to everyone else. But one thing that you mustn't do is to lie to yourself. We have to be real and admit to say this is right and this is wrong. It's very, very surprising that my brother, His Worship the Mayor, tried to run away from the devastating effects, let's say, of the legal sanctions that were imposed on strategic. I'm worried about those imposed on strategic institutions of the state. I'm not worried about those imposed on individuals. I'm worried about these that then have an effect on the lifestyle of the general person. What is the justification to the freezing of accounts of strategic institutions of the state?
Like which one?
If the United States has a problem with ZANU-PF, ZANU-PF has got its own companies. Why not impose sanctions on ZANU-PF companies than impose on ZMDC? ZMDC is not a ZANU-PF company. I have a problem with ZANU-PF corruption. And this is the reason why they had to chase me out after naming and shaming corrupt gurus in ZANU-PF. But I will not be naive to say sanctions don't exist or sanctions are justified. They are not. Both corruption and sanctions are bad and have to be dealt with accordingly. So in regards to the question that you posed to me to say, you said there were issues. Yes, in the report is there. The rapporteur says there were pre-existing social and economic challenges. What that means is we cannot blame the sanctions for all the problems that we have, which means we also have to be genuine in terms of our approach to say, okay, what is it then that forced us to be where we are as a nation? Which is why I said we have issues to do with corruption. You remember the Willowgate scandal? We had a lot of scandals well before the sanctions. So we mustn't then blame the sanctions for all the problems that we have. But we can't run away from the fact that the sanctions have a negative effect on the people of Zimbabwe. Secondly, if you look at the misappropriation of funds, I'll give you an example of the COVID kit. A mask which is supposed to be costing $1 or $2 was charged around $30. That has got nothing to do with sanctions. That's corruption that we have to deal with. We can talk of misplaced priorities, where you see government flashing money unnecessarily all over instead of attending to the critical needs of the people. Instead of taking money, let's say, to empower the indigenous person, the indigenous business people, we have a government that is misdirecting 3.5 billion towards the compensation of settler colonial farmers who were displaced in Zimbabwe. That's a misplaced priority. You have the whole government, party in government. No, look. But I'm saying it's a misplaced priority. We're not saying it's wrong, but it's a misplaced priority. We have critical issues that have to be dealt with that are so urgent. So what I'm saying is, when you have a government that allocates, let's say, $1 million towards the empowerment of young people, but then budgets 19 million for running an election, to win an election, then you have a government which is not focused. So my point is, the rapporteur was very sincere in also pointing out that the sanctions are not to blame for everything. Like now, we continue to have corruption everywhere, where you have, instead of buying ambulances, a party in government is buying cars for campaigns. That's misplaced priority. And obviously that has got an effect on the people.
I'll come back to you turning up.
No, I wanted to round up on that. To say, so we have to be factual. We don't have to defend sanctions. Sanctions are bad, but they can't be blamed wholly for the situation that we have. What we would want is a situation where we are able to deal with both evils, the sanctions and corruption, rather than to downplay the effects of sanctions and then say it's not sanctions, it's corruption. From our point of view, it's both, including mismanagement of resources, misplaced priorities, corruption, plus also sanctions.
Okay. I'll come to you, Sally. If sanctions are removed today, sanctions are gone, do you think that things will change in Zimbabwe?
Well, I believe that things will change in Zimbabwe once sanctions are removed, because these sanctions are actually empowering the very regimes that they're supposed to weaken. Yes, we had corruption before sanctions, but it has worsened after sanctions. We had issues to do with mismanagement, just like any other country. It's not only in Zimbabwe, even in USA, they have issues to do with mismanagement and corruption. But we're not seeing much of it because they're not under sanctions. So I believe that as long as these sanctions remain, the very regimes that are supposed to be weakened are actually empowered and will continue suffering like we're doing today. So these sanctions should be removed. It will give us, the ordinary citizens, some time to see whether the government is performing well or not, and who best can lead Zimbabwe. Because right now we don't know anything. We can't judge anyone because they are not given fair play because of these sanctions. But once these sanctions are removed, I think we are going to see a change in Zimbabwe, a very big change. And I want to comment on something that my brother noted, something to do with paying out of these commercial farmers. to me, that constitution which we have, it's a constitution of compromise, which we had to come up with during the time of unity government. I think the government tried to impress the very oppressors that oppressed us since time immemorial, to say we're going to pay for the land that they stole from our ancestors, and for the structures which they built using the sweat of our ancestors, using forced labor, using stolen resources from our ancestors. And then they say we're going to pay. For me, it's actually nonsensical to say you are actually paying someone for stealing from you. It doesn't make sense, and I think we should advocate for a constitutional amendment on that part.
I just wanted to interrogate when you say it empowers the very regimes that it seeks to weaken, and you also said that corruption has worsened. Are you saying those regimes are corrupt?
All right. I want to give you a very good example, my brother. How many cases of corruption did we have, well-known cases, before sanctions came?
A lot.
Willowgate, with the GMB, with what do you call it? A few. But for the past 20 years, how many cases of corruption have been recorded in Zimbabwe? You will see that the cases have just risen by 100%, which shows that these sanctions are actually fueling corruption in Zimbabwe. They are fueling mismanagement in Zimbabwe, and they should be removed.
Maybe we'll come back to that, but some would argue that because then there was no media space that is open as much as we have now. Then in the back then you only had state papers reporting. But we'll come and interrogate that. Lynn, you had some reservations whilst the secretary for the deputy secretary from the MDC-Alliance was speaking.
Yes, I did. It was the issue to do with the preliminary report. I think the UN Special Rapporteur was clear that this was a preliminary report. We also gave our submissions during the time that the preliminary report came out. But we haven't gone out backing that it was premature, etc., etc. That my colleagues here from the MDC-Alliance should know that not everything is about them. On every process that happens in this country, there's a complaint. They're like crybabies who want to say, why has this been released, yet we have not yet given our submission, etc., etc. But we look at the same brothers here. They're the same brothers who are attacking the UN Special Rapporteur on social media. They're the same people who are now crying foul that the report didn't incorporate their submissions. I mean, my brothers have to put their house in order. We also have to understand that UN is an institution that can never be attacked in a war. And any representative of the UN can never be attacked. And even as the UN rapporteur came into Zimbabwe, she had that immunity. She was not supposed to be attacked. But because their party is now used to attacking everyone, anywhere and anytime, they undermine international law statutes, they undermine an expert of law, a professor of law. Yes, Alina Dohan is a professor of law.
But you said statute.
Wait.
Was undermined.
Diplomacy. Alina Dohan came here. I'm not going to get into an exchange of words with you because I'm not a lawyer. Oh. But I'm going to raise my points. My point of means, if you want, that you people are lawyers would expect you to be diplomatic in your approach. But you're the very same people who go out and attack. No, you're not at all.
Can you allow Madam Masarira
to... What I was basically trying to say is Alina Dohan is an expert of law, a professor of law, and she's trying to work hard to ensure that we get to a stage where sanctions are removed in this country. And any right-thinking Zimbabwean who says that sanctions should not be removed in this country should be interrogated. We've got a cocktail and a myriad of challenges that we're facing in this country. We've got corruption, we've got misgovernance, we've got a whole lot of issues. But sometimes we need to sit back and introspect and say, for how long will people continue to suffer just because we want the US to impose sanctions? When we look at these so-called human rights violations in Zimbabwe, Zimbabwe is not the only country in the world that has got human rights violations.
That is torturing people.
Excuse me, I'm the one who's speaking. When you're speaking, I did not cut you off, Jacob. Can you respect my space?
You did cut me off. It's not the only country killing people and torturing.
If he wants to speak, you can give him the floor. Because I will not have a debate where someone is cutting me off. I gave him his time to speak, and you realized that I had a reservation, and you asked me to speak. And I spoke when you gave me time to speak. So can you call him to order so that I can finish my point?
Please go ahead.
Thank you. So basically what I'm saying is, I'll give examples. In Australia, 2 weeks ago, the police in Australia was strangling people in the streets, was beating up people for not wearing masks, but we did not even hear the US, the so-called police of human rights, is sanctioning Australia, issuing statements about that. Right now in South Africa, less than 2 weeks ago, more than 100 politicians were killed in cold blood. We did not hear the US condemning that. We did not hear the US imposing sanctions on South Africa. We had 43 people who died in Marikana, who were demanding living wages. We did not hear US condemning that or US condemning South Africa. We've got more than 200 women who are raped yearly in police cells in South Africa. I'll give examples of Rwanda. In Rwanda, Diana Rigwari was tortured, arrested. We've seen all sorts of abuse that happens to opposition players in Rwanda, but Rwanda is not on sanctions. We go to Nigeria, we have seen a lot of civil war fueled by the government of the day. We have seen the army in Nigeria attacking its own people. We go to DRC, we go to Zambia. We can name a whole lot of countries where there are a lot of human rights violations. I'm not justifying the human rights violations in Zimbabwe, but I am saying, wait, I am talking about why those other countries with gross human rights violations are not sanctioned. There is something that the United States wants in Zimbabwe.
What is it?
Our minerals. They want a regime change.
There are no minerals.
Wait, they want their diamonds.
There's no oil in Nigeria.
Mr. Mafume, please
can I finish my point?
Please.
So what I'm basically saying is, the Americans are funding despondency in this country through their party, and he knows that. We'll take a case study of Libya. What happened in Libya? The Libyans were agitated to the extent of rising up against their own president. And what has happened to Libya now? It's now a ghost country. They have lost their resources and people are living in abject poverty just because they were listening to a foreign narrative which was being imposed by the US. And if we are not careful as a country, that is where we are going to go, with these comrades of mine supporting that. That is what America wants in Zimbabwe. These US sanctions are meant to cause immense suffering to the people of Zimbabwe, that they fail to sustain their livelihoods. When they fail to sustain their livelihoods, they rise up and fight against their government.
Were we not suffering before the sanctions?
Pardon?
Before
the sanctions, I'll give you an example. I grew up in the 80s. I grew up in Greencroft. I went to Hallingbury Primary School. All the streets had lighting. There was water. At our schools, we used to be given government books. We never bought books when I was growing up. Everything was there in this country before sanctions. We need to be realistic about that. I never suffered when I was going to school during my primary school days. I actually dreamt of a better life than the one that I was living then.
ISAB. You don't know ISAB?
I know ISAB, but it was not as bad as what we went through. You know, ISAB wasn't as bad as 2005, 6, 7, 8, and 9.
People lost their jobs.
And you also made us lose our jobs in 2015 when you went and to the SWA judgment.
But Linda, I find it amazing when you speak about lack of diplomacy. Are you going to call out those who are tagged Anna Tibaijuka, who attacked the UN Rapporteur on human rights, and just recently we released a damning report on Zimbabwe, and they were attacked by members of government who are supposed to be...
That is basically what I'm saying. There is no one who's got a right to attack people, especially from the UN. That is basically what I'm saying. Whether it's ZANU-PF, it's MDC, it's LEAD, it's FIZ, it's a broad alliance against sanctions. We need to respect the work that United Nations do. And if we do not respect their work, then who will assist us to be able to solve the social and political problems that we have in this country? We need to respect those institutions. We need to respect their representatives. But if we say that we know it all and we can do it on our own, then let's do it on our own. And when we are doing it on our own, let's not cry foul.
Amazing. I'll come to you, but primarily we need to respect the views and contributions of others. We will give you, each and every one of you, an opportunity to speak. So when someone is speaking, let them speak so that you engage with their points instead of them as they speak. I'll come to you, Mr. Mafume. Your party has accepted the report that was produced by Anna Tibaijuka. it accepted the report that was produced by the Special Rapporteur on Human Rights when that report was damning of the government and ZANU-PF. But this one, because you don't like, do you have the right to cherry pick? It's the same UN.
You must understand that there are special rapporteurs on certain aspects. Special rapporteurs, according to the UN, are independent of the UN system. There are special rapporteurs, and for example, this one was an office which was seconded by Iran and so forth. So they're coming up and all these other states that have got one element in them being rogue, seconded by Venezuela and so forth, and comes from Belarus. What's happened with the UN Special Rapporteur system? It is by resolution of the General Assembly that a country then proposes a special rapporteur on anything. You can propose a UN special rapporteur on clean air. They don't get a salary from the UN. They are not funded by the UN. They are probably funded by the people who invite them to come here. And that is where the fundamental issue should also, people should be able to distinguish these types of institutions that make up the rapporteur. Then secondly, when a UN system is criticized, it is not an issue of attacking. You know, you have read and seen the films of the Rwanda genocide. There was a UN office in Rwanda when the Tutsis were being massacred. There were reactions. It didn't intervene. And if somebody, and Kagame has been a leading critic of the role of the UN during the time of the genocide. A lot of people have been critics of the role of the UN. You know, the peacekeeping reports, the sexual abuse that has gone on in DRC, in where peacekeepers have gone. These were people bringing peace under the UN. But then there were certain activities done by the officers of the UN. So this is not an institution coming from heaven, okay, to do implementations. It is made up of human beings, okay, who've got shortcomings and failings. So we cannot act as if somebody comes and they do a report, that report cannot be scrutinized. It has to be scrutinized, particularly where the report comes out when you are still interviewing key inputs to the report and it comes out. Now that is a fundamental problem. We are not saying that they should not operate whoever and however they want, but there are consequences when you do things in a manner that is not acceptable in terms of preparing reports. I mean, at least even if you are going to be biased, have the decency of listening to other people before you publish your report. It's the only professional and decent thing to do. And by asking for someone to do that, we are not criticizing, we are not attacking, we are simply criticizing your methodology, and we are putting it on record that the way you've done your process is not normal. If you didn't want to hear from us, why call us?
But you think you are such a big player to change the findings that she had already made? Because I think she met you on day 10. So would your contribution have changed what she would have seen?
Well, who is to know now? Because we were not given the chance. But you would expect that a United Nations has got protocols and procedures. It's like going to court and told that the judge has given you a death sentence, and then being asked to, no, you're going to die anyway. Do you think the judge would have changed his mind by seeing you? We can't operate like that in a civil society, in democratic nations, where a person is outside the courtroom and judgment is passed, and then you will then be told, look, you were going to be killed anyway.
Okay, then the last thing I wanted to also appreciate from you is that what do you think that you were supposed to see in the report that is missing?
What we were supposed to see in the report are the steps. One, the recognition of the causality of any issues. What is there? What has led to us being here? As articulated in this NDS system, the government report here, it's very clear. Respect of beepers, stopping of human rights violations, resolution and ratification of bilateral arrangement, re-engagement with the wider community, bolster and consolidate existing relations, prioritize rejoining the Commonwealth as a launchpad to unlock international goodwill. Remember, some of these things, we did them on our own. We were not chased away from the Commonwealth. Who was chased away from the Commonwealth? We announced ourselves that we are leaving the Commonwealth. And under NDS1, we are saying we are going to the Commonwealth. IMF, we stopped paying. The government stopped paying. And here it says, itself, the government, will prioritize the payment of IMF. So if someone is giving you money, and you stop paying the money, you think that person will give you more money? I mean, it is this sense of entitlement that is bewildering. How do you do that? Then here it says better communication with the rest of the world. I will quote, sustained bad publicity heightened the country risk factor, undermined investor confidence. While politically the Zimbabwean society has become and remained polarized. And the NDS says we're going to deal with the polarization. So they've got a strategy and an implementation plan that they've buried with this Musiswo Moyo. Apparently. You cannot scream diplomacy at people and expect that they will change their ways when you've got a perfectly good document that if is followed, I'm not the one who wrote it. This is the Zimbabwean government, and they adopted it, and they know what to do to get international re-engagement. Okay. It is not this screaming that is being done by my lady comrade, as she calls herself, Estwal. I don't know whether she's passed away, but she's very much alive, so she's not Estwal. So
I want to come to you. Tsenengam, and yeah, I just want to come to you, Tsenengam, and say that once we say that sanctions, as you said, sanctions have made our suffering as Zimbabweans get worse. I want to appreciate that our government manages to buy tear gas, manages to import anti-riot gear from Israel and other places. Expensive vehicles for ministers, they have 4x4s, luxury vehicles and stuff like that. Why is it that the sanctions becoming an issue?
MPs also have luxury vehicles.
Yeah, they are all government.
Even the chiefs,
yes.
Including the MDC MPs, they also have luxury vehicles.
Yes, that is government, parliament and ministers, and that is government, Madam Linda Masani. So, my question is, why is it that sanctions affect the hospitals, not the parliamentarian, not the ministers, not the chiefs, but hospitals?
Okay, thank you, Dara. I think what I would want to say first is let's also come to a point where, as Zimbabweans, we don't just look at issues from a party perspective in defending our party positions and trying to justify everything. I think that's a very bad tendency with the majority of us as politicians.
True.
Like I've said, sanctions are in place. If you go through ZANU-PF, the first one that was passed in 2001, December 2001, less than 3 months after the US had been bombed, September 11, they were already dealing with another issue outside the United States, dealing with Zimbabwe. So it must tell you how they prioritize Zimbabwe in terms of their foreign policy, to a point where I think a year or two.
Mr. Nangam, you're not facing my question.
No, I'm coming to your question.
My question is simple to you.
I'm coming to your question.
Yes.
I'm coming to your question.
Yeah,
I'm coming to your question. This is how I'm answering it. Okay. To say, so these sanctions, according to ZDERA, if you go through ZDERA, it's there in terms of the Secretary of the US instructing every executive director to vote against extension of loans, to vote against debt cancellation and everything. And those are economic sanctions. Then we have travel restrictions. So those ones, obviously, when a country is not able to get a line of credit, obviously it has got an impact on the capacity of the government in being able to deliver on certain issues. So we can't run away from the effects of sanctions on social infrastructure. But however, like I've already highlighted, the majority of our problems are as a result of misappropriation of the resources that we have, are a result of corruption that we continue to witness on a daily basis in government, are as a result of misplaced priorities in government, where you have a whole president taking a 100-member delegation to a climate change conference when other countries are taking not more than 5. Are we supposed to be doing that, bearing in mind that we are under sanctions? So sanctions do not affect the number of delegates that you take to the COP26, but they affect service delivery. So fine, like I've said, we must accept.
Does that make sense to you? This is what that was the gist of my question.
Yeah.
That it affects buying Panado, but it doesn't affect buying a SUV V8 Land Cruiser.
No, what I'm pointing at is we are experiencing effects of sanctions. We can't run away from that. But to a very large extent, it is because of corruption, mismanagement of national resources, misplaced priorities, and poor governance, where you have a whole government prioritizing buying cars for MPs when hospitals do not have ambulances, when a whole government prioritizes hosting an anti-sanctions gala. Hosting an anti-sanctions gala is not a sanctions-busting measure.
True.
You must direct that man instead to hospitals if we are genuine to say the sanctions are affecting our health delivery services system. So the point that the problem that we're having is we have a leadership that doesn't care about the welfare of the people, who have found a valid reason to use in running away from carrying out their responsibilities and mandates as a government. You'd also find that like sanctions have also exposed us to things like China, where you now have a whole menace of the Chinese being in Zimbabwe, displacing our people, because we can't also even trade freely with the rest of the world. So we are forced to deal with the Chinese, and we are then compromised. We cannot even regulate them. And I was trying to come up to the point that the UN Rapporteur is a Belarusian. Not that I want to be negative on here because of where she's coming from. But we also have a menace by the Belarusians who are around here, who are displacing our people. And these are not sanctions. And all that is happening because we have a leadership that is condoning that. So yes, sanctions have an effect on our hospitals, have an effect on the livelihoods of the people. But if we had a focused leadership, if we had a leadership that has got people at heart, we could not have been hit hard by these sanctions. Smith had these sanctions. I was listening to one of the documentaries by Smith, where he was able to look in and try to find solutions to build his industry, because he was being isolated by the United Nations. Remember, these sanctions are not from the UN, and we are not forbidden from trading with the rest of the world. But maybe a few countries and maybe some few corporates But like she has said, the government is now using that to justify their corruption, to justify their looting, and it is difficult for us to hold them accountable, because they will be saying, no, we had to go through Kudakwasheta Gwire as a sanctions busting measure, when we can see that this is pure greed. But because they have a valid reason to say, we are trying to do this to bust sanctions, so we were not able to do this.
But look at this way. The Americans wanted to come and build, they tendered and won the tender to build the Dema power station,
Yeah.
At a cheaper price.
Okay.
It was taken away from them and was given to Tagwire. Is that a sanction busting move?
No, definitely it's not. Which is why I've said that they found a way to legitimize their looting and corruption. So the United States is not doing us any favor by maintaining these sanctions, because they are aiding the oppression of the people, the looting that is happening here in the name of sanctions busting. So we must be able to take our leadership to account and say, why are you doing 1, 2, 3? But at some point, we are disempowered and disarmed, because they always run and say, no, we are doing this because we are trying to bust sanctions. So sanctions must go, and corruption must fall. Both evils are not good in our eyes as the Front for Economic Emancipation in Zimbabwe. And no party should justify the existence of sanctions, and no party should justify their looting and say we are busting sanctions. It's not right.
I want to come to you. Tsengam raises important points here to say that anti-sanctions march and galas are not sanction-busting measures. You have been camped outside the United States of America Embassy in Harare for more than 1,000 days now, I presume. Is that a sanctions-busting measure? Would it not make sense for you to camp outside your government offices at Munumtapa and demand that they stop human rights abuses so that sanctions go?
Like Linda said, I don't think we have gross human rights abuses in Zimbabwe, like other countries, compared to other countries.
Which one?
Can you please give
actually what we have in Zimbabwe are people who create stories of human rights abuses. We have people who are trying to defame the country to the extent that they can do anything so that they just tarnish the country. As of human rights abuses, my brother, we don't have gross human rights abuses in Zimbabwe compared to other countries. So I don't think I would go to government offices to say I'm demonstrating against human rights abuses. The very same people who talk of human rights abuses who sanctioned us today have got skulls of our ancestors in UK, in their museums, which they took saying their trophies after they murdered our ancestors in broad daylight. But today they lecture us about human rights abuses. Is there gross human rights abuses which exceeds what they did? To me, it doesn't make sense. I would never go and demonstrate against human rights abuses. What we need in Zimbabwe is we need to go on the table as all political parties, as all Zimbabweans, and discuss about issues to do with development and how we can proceed forward as a nation. And to those, that's why as Broad Alliance Against Sanctions, we petitioned the Parliament of Zimbabwe to enact the Patriotic Act, because even in the United States they have the Logan Act, because we are realizing that these issues that we have in Zimbabwe are because we actually don't have an act to punish people who go about tarnishing the image of the country.
Do you think that the people who steal gold and are got at the airport with a handbag full of gold, people who are corrupt, who have been paying money to a company that are outside the country that only existed in 2 months, are not tarnishing the image of this country? According
to the petition that we sent to Parliament, even those that are doing corruption in Zimbabwe, they should be they should be found wanting by the Patriotic Act. Even the journalists who write rubbish and lie that ABCD is happening in Zimbabwe, it is not happening, should be punished. Those who say they've been abducted, yet there are no abductions, should be punished. Those who say our rights...
Those who abduct?
Yes, those who are abducted, yes, they should have if the evidence is there that they are abducted.
But the government of this country,
civic society,
the government of this country abducted Justina Mkoko, kept her incommunicado, denied, even published adverts in newspapers that the police were looking for Justina Mkoko and they were offering a reward for anyone who brought. But Justina Mkoko was brought into a police station by CIOs. The very government that was denying. The courts ruled that Justina Mkoko should be compensated. A minister of this country issued a certificate to say those who abducted were operating on state instructions. And you want us to believe what you are saying? I mean, the people watching.
All right. I wouldn't want to comment much on what happened during the old dispensation, because according to the reasons why they enacted this Zidera, we have seen the new dispensation actually working towards most of the things that they put. For example, they talked of removal of POSA, removal of what do you call it, IPA, and things like that, and we have seen the government doing it. So even the gross human rights abuses that we saw during the what do you call it, the old dispensation, we don't see them happening now. That's why I say I wouldn't say there are gross human rights abuses in Zimbabwe.
But they denied the same old,
then
they denied the same way you're denying right now.
I'm saying back then there were human rights abuses.
But they were denied, that's my point. Same way.
I wouldn't comment because it's not me who was doing those human rights abuses. But I'm speaking from a civic society point of view. What the problem that we have in Zimbabwe is actually all those things to do with abductions and things, they seem to be timed. Whenever something good, or whether we have visitors coming to Zimbabwe, these rapporteurs and whatever, that's when we see people being abducted. Or whenever the sanctions are about to be reviewed, we see people abducting themselves and doing issues like that. And one of our people actually said the problem in Zimbabwe that we have is that of crisispreneurs, to the extent that we have the crisis coalition of Zimbabwe, a coalition of crisis, that whenever, even if there is no crisis, they create a crisis in Zimbabwe to make sure that the image of the country is defamed.
You had a point that you wanted to raise.
Yes.
Please raise your point, then I'll ask my question.
Now, the point I wanted to raise is, I think my brother Jacob here is missing the point. He keeps on referring to MDS-1, which is a government of Zimbabwe document. And here we are discussing the UN Rapporteur's report on the negative impact of sanctions on human rights. He keeps on quoting about re-engagement, etc., which is what we're not discussing that here. He raised the issue that the Belarusian, Alina Dohan, was forwarded to UN by Iran, etc., but we should also consider the fact that Iran and Venezuela are in the same shoes with us. They are under economic sanctions, coercive unilateral sanctions, and these countries, she has worked on them and she has given reports on them. And what is going on in Venezuela, what is going on in Iran is similar to what is going on in Zimbabwe. So we cannot rule her out by the mere fact that she was actually forwarded by Iran. And whether or not she is not funded by the UN is immaterial, because she still represents the UN. If she did not represent the UN, there is no reason why they would call her a UN special rapporteur. He raised the issue that she's not acceptable and that her report is not acceptable. It's not acceptable to who? She gave her report, and her report has been accepted by various institutions. SADC accepted it, the Zimbabwe government accepted it, LEAD accepted it, and a whole lot of international bodies are accepting it. That's why I'll keep on saying that not everything is about the MDC-A. I have also noted that you're conflating issues. Your worship, Mayor of Harare. Yes, I'm commenting what you are saying because you are out of the box. We are discussing the UN Rapporteur's report, not the NDS-1 that was written by the late SB.
But doesn't it make sense that he puts his point from the way that he sees it and how it connects with the sanctions.
It's not connecting with the sanctions issue here, because he was quoting about the re-engagement and the Commonwealth, etc., etc. We want to deal with the issue to do with sanctions. We want sanctions removed so that the government of Zimbabwe does not have a point to say we are failing because of sanctions. We want them removed so that we can hold them to account. We can hold them to account.
You can't hold them to account.
How do we hold them to account when they are also complaining about sanctions?
You can't hold them to account that there was drug scale. You can't hold them to account that NASA was looted dry.
We have been holding them to account for that.
But you are just saying you can't hold them to account.
Because they always justify that we are under sanctions. That is why we have taken a lead also.
How do you justify what, for instance, happened, a whole minister taking money from NASA, pension contributions, and taking it to her own constitution to campaign to get into office?
And you say it's sanctions.
How does someone justify
I'm on the record. I am on record calling out, condemning the corruption that happened at NASA. A lot of senior citizens were affected, and I'm still on record demanding justice for that money to be paid back, for every pensioner to get proper and decent pensions. And I've been on record, I think I'm one of the very few Zimbabweans who fights for pensioners day in and day out. So we cannot try and put in this NASA issue here, because I'm one of those people.
No, I'm asking you a simple question here.
That
you
is
said you can't hold government to account. So I'm asking you whether you can't hold a government to account on these issues as well. That's all I'm asking.
I'm on record holding them to account for that. But I'm saying they keep on justifying their corruption using the sanctions mantra. So if we want to stop this justification using the sanctions mantra, let's push for the sanctions to be removed. Then we'll see how they will justify the corruption that they're doing. Corruption is a cancer that has destroyed our society. And no one is in denial about that. Corruption and sanctions are like Siamese twins.
Do you think corruption is justifiable?
It's not justifiable. It's not justified
by anything. You are saying that they are justifying it and you are accepting it.
No, ZANU-PF and government are justifying.
Are you accepting that justification?
I'm not accepting it. That is why I'm calling for the removal of sanctions, so that they will not use the sanctions issue to justify their corruption.
Someone said abductions are faked. Do you believe that?
I believe that. I believe that. There is no, we are talking of the abductions that have happened since 2017. We cannot talk about what happened in the Ncube era. Everything that happened in the Ncube era is well documented, well...
Has she been compensated?
Wait. Justina was compensated. Yes.
You can talk.
So what I'm basically saying is, I think because you've asked the question, I'll answer it as honestly as I can. I have been a member of the MDC. I've been a member of the Crisis Coalition. Those that. Can I go ahead? What happens is every time there is a UN special rapporteur or any diplomat coming to Zimbabwe, there has to be a scene of normative leverage that is created to maintain a certain narrative about Zimbabwe. And we cannot go on like that. I got fatigued. I got tired of the shenanigans. We need to push for development. Zimbabweans have suffered enough. Workers are earning paltry salaries because of people who've got an insatiable appetite for power, who will do anything to agitate their followers and supporters to follow a certain narrative that they are being given by senators who visit them, US senators who visit them in their homes. But there are US senators, let me tell you. There are US senators. Can I finish? There are US senators who go to MPs' houses, senators' houses with boxes of black money.
I want to hear you go further. But I just wanted to find out from you, how does a senator visit, how does a senator's visit to someone's home affect the salary of a doctor at Parelinyatwa? I just want you to make that connection.
I am telling you that these visits, kunenge kuchitwa delivery inonzi black money box.
I want to
those black money boxes are the ones that will be used now after the money has been cleaned to agitate the people. To agitate people to do certain things and certain actions.
How does it affect the salary of a nurse at Parelinyatwa? Because you said they are poor because of that.
No,
so I want our people
we are poor because we are following narratives that are against Zimbabwe. We are not pushing narratives that develop Zimbabwe. Imagine if we're all development oriented, pushing for proper wages for everyone in this country. I don't think we'll be where we are today. But But the problem is we are always creating crisis. We are always fighting each other. And in the process of fighting each other, there are people who want to protect their territories. And whilst they're protecting their territories, they don't care if you suffer or if you don't suffer. And this is very evident in ZANU-PF and MDC. ZANU-PF is protecting its territory, and whether you are getting a proper salary or not, they are protecting their territory because people have to suffer so that they give them protest votes. They actually enjoy the suffering of people because they entrench their votes.
I just wanted us to go through your statement. You said that the senators will visit.
Is that even possible?
Sorry, Mr. Mafumi. I'm the moderator here, Mr. Mafumi.
But a senator.
Can you name the senators who have visited politicians' house? Which politician's house and which senator did this?
I did not come here to shame people. I came here to discuss the UN Rapporteur's report.
You make an allegation, we want you to sustain it.
You want me to sustain it, I'll go and take the evidence and I'll give it to you and then you'll see it.
You're lying. A senator.
You said from 2017 abductions were fake. Do you think that Tatenda Mombearara, who still has a nail in his hand, abducted himself, whose knee is broken and has got a steel plating?
I did not follow the Tatenda Mombearara story. I cannot comment about it because I don't know what happened to Tatenda Mombearara. I didn't follow the story, so I can't comment about it.
It's lying.
Okay, no, I just wanted to make clarity because you said since 2017 and Tatenda Mombearara was allegedly abducted during that time. So I wanted to find out if it's possible.
I don't know who abducted him. I didn't follow the story.
Okay.
It's lying.
I'm lying. Are you in my mind?
Yes. You're lying. You don't come here and lie.
I want to come to you. I want to come to you, Ms. Mafumi. I mean, do you justify sanctions that are imposed on Zimbabwe?
I don't justify anything.
Your party does.
Our party does not justify. What we have said and what we continue saying is that if you follow the re-engagement path that the government outlined for itself, remember, we have been following a democratization path as a government. We had a disputed election in 2008 where Tsvangirai was denied by the security sector of getting into government. And we then had an inclusive government where we agreed on a homegrown constitution as a method of dealing with our pariah status and re-engaging both the local community and the international community. All of those things have been crystallized into this document. And one of them was that we will join the Commonwealth. Because maybe people do not understand when they say sanctions. Okay? One of them is that we are not a member of Commonwealth. We removed ourselves from the Commonwealth. One of them is that we are not paying or getting money from IMF. For your own information, Godfrey, that vote has never been made that you are talking about because we stopped paying IMF in the 90s, okay? We stopped repaying. It was only now that Mthuli is trying to repay the IMF. So we could not get money because we simply were not.
Why did you pay during the GN?
The question is simple here, Mr. Mafumi.
So we don't justify anything.
What is your problem in saying sanctions must go now?
Well, we have no problem in saying that. I can say
that
now.
Say it.
Yes, I'm saying it. Sanctions must go now.
Thank you.
And sanctions must go now on the basis of the NDS report. People must implement the constitutional reforms. People must implement the rejoining of the Commonwealth. People must stop torturing people. People must free the media. Right now, journalists are being arrested, not in the previous dispensation. Journalists are being beaten, not in the previous dispensation. We are the only country in the world with one TV station, not in the previous dispensation. We are the only country in the world with one radio station with different names, not in the previous dispensation. So if you are having the same conditions of lack of freedom, deal with that lack of freedom for the people and everything else will follow. Seek ye first political freedom and human rights for your own people, and the whole world will embrace you. Other countries will not deal with a government that tortures its people, that does not free the media, that arrests opponents. Right now, our president, Nelson Chamisa, was being chased all over the provinces by state operators. Now, how do you expect the international community to engage with you when you are chasing the opposition and preventing the opposition? I will welcome him to the opposition, as he's saying he wants to be an opposition leader. You will understand very soon, when he's trying to hold his own launch meetings and any other meeting, what it means to be an opposition leader. Then we will have this same...
But Mwonzora is having his own meetings without...
Mwonzora is ZANU-lite. You know, he is a ZANU-lite, a distilled version of ZANU-PF. So yes, he will enjoy himself in this country. He will have meetings wherever he wants. He even supports everything. Where have you seen an opposition leader who goes and praises the ruling party for allowing him to be there? He is happy that the ruling party continues ruling him and that he will continue opposing it for as long as it is ruling him. He has no intention of taking over from it. He wants to oppose it peacefully.
But he said you win by 66%.
Where? Winning where? And what? When he's saying he's so happy to be led by the current government. Like my dear colleague here, she is happy to oppose the government. Happily singing praises of it, to say no, it is doing very well, it is a very good government.
Is it not doing well?
It's doing well where? We have no currency. The only country
no currency
in the world that, do you know any note? Do you buy with anything?
Got the 50.
It's called a bond note. That's why it's not called the currency.
It's ZWD.
It's RTGS.
I've not seen it. That's not
RTGS is a payment system.
RTGS is an online
Why
payment
is it called
system.
bond? Money is called money.
Why is it called bond?
As you look at it, Tika, you are the one getting it from government. We don't get paid by that government. No one in this country has money. This country has no currency. People, civil servants, are earning the less of the equivalent of 50 US. You don't know that. People are not getting treated in the hospitals. There are no ambulances. People are dying of hunger. You don't know that. You think everything is paradise. Which oasis are you living in? If it's paradise for yourself because you're getting paid, then you tell people that you're enjoying yourself. Right now you were lying that a senator went to anyone's house. Do you know how a senator moves? When they came here the last time, a senator, it's a public thing. A senator cannot move from the America to go into a person's house. It's a lie and you know it. You pretend to have been part of the opposition. Were you arresting yourself? You spent months in jail. Did you volunteer to go into that jail? You went around and said, arrest me, arrest me. Did you do that? Or you were genuinely arrested? If you were not genuinely arrested, say it and say it now. Tell us that.
You are my lawyer. You
yes,
tell us.
I know that. That's why
you are my lawyer.
That's why I'm
You're
saying.
contradicting yourself.
That's why I'm saying.
But he's asking you a genuine
Question.
question. Because you're saying
you were part of the opposition.
I'll answer you.
So did you arrest yourself?
I'm not in the habit of interrupting people.
No,
so I'm
allow you to answer.
Were you arresting yourself?
Okay, I'm going to respond to everything you have said.
You are. Yes, you are arresting yourself.
You started by saying there's no currency in this country.
There is no
have a currency in this country. There's in dollar.
It's not true. There's no Zim dollar.
No, you see, that's.
Can you? I allowed you to answer the question. Were you arresting yourself?
How would I arrest myself? No, we need to be able to differentiate where we are now and where we are coming from. Because at the end of the day, what I hate is the hypocrisy by my brothers. When we go to 2017, right? The MDC worked with the wait. No, Mira, you see, I want you to understand one thing and all the viewers to understand.
Were you arresting yourself?
I am the only person who challenged the legitimacy of Mnangagwa post the 2017 military takeover. I asked for all these lawyers to assist me, they refused. Because they were part and parcel of the action that happened in November. 2017, and they were promised a GNU. Now, because they come guns out blazing as if they were not part and parcel of what happened in November 2017. Everyone wanted Mugabe to go.
But did you
I never arrested myself. I was very abused during that time by the system, and I continue to be abused.
Why do you say others are faking it when yours is genuine?
I'm waiting for the proof to come out on whether they were really abducted. Yes, we need that.
But you were abused.
Yes, I was abused, I was violated, I was beaten up, I was assaulted. There are videos of that happening. But
when someone else is done to them,
you say it's a lie.
It's a lie.
I did not say it's a lie. But when they are
you actually did.
I came to the conclusion that it's a lie because of the inconsistencies. I'm one person who's very analytical when things happen. I just don't comment there and then, but I look at the trends, what has been said, what has been reported. At the moment Papa Notanga Tama inconsistent, then there's something wrong.
I will allow us to get to the closing of this. Yeah. So I will allow each and every one of my panelists to give us their closing remarks. I'll start with you, Godfrey Tserengam.
Thank you so much, Dan.
Yes.
Well, I would want first to say there is a problem that some of our brothers in the MDC-Alliance think that they are the only ones who are genuine.
Exactly, thank you.
In opposing ZANU-PF. Some time ago, the MDC-Alliance Vice President, Honorable Tendai Biti, came out of the MDC to form the PDP. And they were labeled a CIO project.
All of us here, including Jacob.
Yeah, they were labeled that. Because they had broken away from the main MDC. And that's a very bad tendency to think that whoever doesn't agree with them is a ZANU-PF project.
Or is paid by ZANU.
Because at some point they were also painted with the same brush.
Exactly.
And it's very, very unfortunate. It also happened to Mthuli, that is a CIO agent, but is now back in the fold as a vice president. So sometimes you wonder why they have to do that, to say whoever is disagreeing with them is a ZANU-PF project. I was in ZANU-PF before I was expelled. I have seen ZANU-PF projects in the MDC. People strategically positioned who work with the ZANU-PF day in, day out. So I may be qualified to point at certain individuals and say you are a ZANU-PF project because I worked with you when I was in ZANU-PF.
So they are genuine to accuse each other of being ZANU-PF projects, because you are admitting that they are ZANU-PF projects.
My point is, whoever doesn't agree with them does not mean that is a ZANU-PF project. That when you are disagreeing with Jacob Mafume because he's MDC-Alliance, then you are a ZANU-PF project. Before the MDC came into being, we had ZUDU, Zimbabwe Union of Democracy, but they didn't join ZUDU. Why? Because they didn't agree with the ZUDU ideology. So everyone else who doesn't disagree with the MDC-A ideology must be allowed to assemble freely and do their political activities as much as they also want to enjoy that freedom. I would want to say yes. I was one of the people who thought abductions are fake. Yes, I'll say that today. I thought when I was in ZANU-PF, because no one was persecuting me, I thought all this was dramatized and fake. Until the 12th of July last year, when 3 armed men broke into my farmhouse in Pindura, abducted my kids, took them away, harassed them. My kids. One who is in Form 3, the other one who is doing grade 5, and the other one who is doing grade 1. I can show you a message that she sent to me after I sent to her a front page of the Daily News, which I had said we thought it would be better. She sent me a message and said, are we going to be safe? Are they not going to do that to us again? Because she suffered. Because it happened to my kids, I now know it's real. So those who know that abductions are fake, I think they must furnish us with more information regarding that, because my kids went through that horror. So from that day, that's when I started believing that no, this thing really happens. So in terms of those who dramatize abductions and everything, I want to get more information about that. But from my personal experience and from my family experience, it's real. Because these people went to my home looking for me. That was on a Sunday. They had seen me in Bindura on a Friday. We discussed, they thought I was in Bindura till Tuesday. I went out of Bindura on that very same day on Friday. They went to my home on a Sunday. I was not there, I was in Harare. And I was trying to imagine what was going to happen to me if they had found me at my farmhouse. So obviously someone would then say, Tsenengam is trying to seek relevance. He's trying to abduct himself. So but what I'm telling is, this happened to my kids. We made a police report and nothing happened. And it is against this background that I condemn the abductions, the allegations that someone has been abducted or so. From that day, I do not dispute it because my kids experienced it and went through that trauma. Then the other issue that I want to talk about is that, well, I think no one must try to say, like my brother Jacob has been saying, to say the government knows what to do. No, he mustn't speak on behalf of the Americans who imposed sanctions on Zimbabwe. He mustn't say, we will lift these sanctions if you do 1, 2, 3. Why is he saying they must follow through what they did? Why is he saying that? Let the Americans say so. He is not the American spokesperson. Instead, he must be saying, from what he has said, he acknowledges the presence of sanctions and the impact of sanctions.
But he didn't. He spoke about what
I said the government of Zimbabwe said. I repeated.
What I'm
speaking on the behalf of anyone else.
What I'm saying is, he is saying for the sanctions to be removed, the government knows what to do.
I never said that. I think I never spoke for the American. Look, what I said.
Okay. Anyway, let me continue.
What I thought I heard is that he said the Zimbabwean government has put its roadmap to remove those sanctions, which roadmap was put by SP Moyo in the NDS1. This is what I heard, unless I heard something.
No, what is just saying is the sanctions must remain in place until such a time when the government of Zimbabwe has done 1, 2, 3, because the government knows what it has to do, but because it has not done, the sanctions will remain in place. But there mustn't be any justification to the continued existence of sanctions. There mustn't be any justification.
Yeah, but you're justifying them.
I'm justifying. There is a roadmap.
Yeah, but what he says is exactly what you said, Mr. Mafume. You said that if they follow this roadmap, the sanctions will be removed. Yes. So he is basically
someone that if you want to have a child, this is the process you will have to have a child. Doesn't mean that I'm speaking on behalf of all people who want to.
Okay, anyway, can you please conclude?
Okay, fine. I think his example doesn't fit in here.
It fits.
Okay. Well, what I'm saying is, no one must justify the continued existence of sanctions. Sanctions must go.
And must go yesterday.
Exactly.
Thank you very much.
Lastly, what I wanted to point out is, my sister here mustn't also justify human rights violations and say we have not witnessed the gross. So only when there are gross violations, that's when you condemn. No, we can't have that. No one has a right to abuse anyone, whether there are gross violations or not. There mustn't be any human rights violations. And these violations, these human rights must be observed, not because we don't want to be sanctioned, but because they are human rights and we must enjoy them. Maybe she will also understand when she's kicked out of ZANU-PF and when the very system that she thinks is right starts persecuting her. Ask those who were in ZANU-PF who thought that this system is good about their experience outside ZANU-PF. Mukoma iribere. I'll tell you this. ZANU-PF nenge bere. Rekuti kana wakati tasha kudai. Anditi. Unengo chinakiro so vanhu vachiti wana uchimhanya. Paunodona. Kubva paberero rakutarisa. Woziva kuti wausavi. So I've always said to my comrades, varume bvisai bereri mazino. Boss bereri chakudya iri. Munangagwa akatombobuda akaita border jump. Mugabe akafa akuharaswa nesame system akaramwa akanovigwa kwazvimba. Anditi mukatarisa vanhu vese vakanga varimu vana Mutasa vanani vaimbofunga kuti no zvinhu hazviitike. Ukanzwa zvanga zvaakuita na Innocent Kala mumba make ndo makaumbirwa ZANU but akazofa akuituka. So ndinogara ndichitaura kwarume kuti varume regai kudhakwa nepower. Ingoitai zvinhu zviri normal, musaende kuma extremes, knowing very well kuti power iri one day munomuka musina. That's all I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sir.
All right. I think I would like to wrap up saying sanctions must be removed. They've caused untold suffering to the people of Zimbabwe, and they should be removed as in like yesterday, because these sanctions haven't benefited anyone. They haven't benefited those who asked for sanctions. If they've benefited anything, I think they should come up and say we have really benefited from these sanctions. They haven't benefited us, the ones that are said to be protected by the sanctions. I haven't seen these sanctions stopping the so-called human rights violations. I haven't seen these sanctions bringing total democracy in Zimbabwe. I haven't seen them bringing rule of law in Zimbabwe. So it means they are useless, they are not working, and they should go.
Thank you very much. Madam Linda.
I just wanted to make a comment about the abductions and all. I think we've got a problem in our country where we run to conclusions and make a lot of noise sometimes without clarity. I'm sorry to what happened to my brother Godfrey Tsenangame here. And I understand what he went through. Because last year in July, if you go to Marlborough police station, there's a report that I filed today. I was attacked by a black Range Rover with 2 men with guns and etc. etc. But I didn't rush to say it's the system or it's ZANU-PF or it's MDC, because I've got so many enemies. I wanted the course of justice to take its course. But to date, we still haven't found who was in that black Range Rover. The number plates were fake. They went to CVR and all. So there are a lot of things that happen in this country. But at the end of the day, when we go back, everyone wants to point fingers that the attack is coming from that particular angle. But maybe for me, it's a different scenario because I've got enemies in the MDC, I've got enemies in ZANU, I've got enemies in the other corner, etc., etc. Because I stand on my ground and I stand on my views, and I will not be swayed to think in a particular way that other people are thinking because they'll create stories about me. So basically, yes, I've got friends here. So in parting, I would just want to say we are all Zimbabweans, regardless of which political party we are from, and we need to put the interests of Zimbabwe first. We can differ in political ideology, we can differ in political preference, we can differ in the leader that we want, but at the end of the day, we all have to put our minds together to build national cohesion in this country, to mend the broken social fabric, to unite in our diversity, to move Zimbabwe forward. We will not move forward whilst we have sanctions in place. Economic warfare, economic terrorism, it's pulling us backwards. We cannot develop when we are always fighting each other, but we need to address what we have all failed in our relevant corners over the past 20 and 40 years, depending on how many years you've been in leadership. As long as we are not clear, as long as we do not come out clean like what happened in Rwanda, they had to sit down, the Hutus and the Tutsis, after they had murdered each other, and say enough is enough. Let's reconcile, let's forgive each other, let's work together to build our country. That is what we need in Zimbabwe. As long as we are still pointing fingers at each other and saying you did that, and people refusing to honor their role in the polarity in this country, the toxicity that we have, we're not doing justice to ourselves. At the end of the day, we all need to disagree to agree that sanctions should be removed and we deal with the corruption issue. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's very interesting that when a lion is eating a goat, it then says the goat must own up to its role in it being eaten. It does not make sense. That is not how society is structured anywhere in the world. It's not some egalitarian, utopian system where there is a false equivalence in being a victim and in being an abuser. In every society, there are victims. When people said colonialism is bad, they were victims. It did not call upon the victims to own up to their role in being colonized. When people said apartheid is bad, they were victims. You do not are not called upon on your role to your apartheidism.
But they forgave the white people and they moved on.
What you do is you fight. When they say dictatorship and human rights abuses are bad, the one who is dictating and who is doing the human rights abuses must simply just stop. And when you are in government and you are running an executive function of the state, you've got responsibilities. If you put a plan in motion on what to do to engage the international community, you follow it. You don't make promises to the international community, to the local people, to say, these are the steps I'm going to take. And then you want to blame Mafume for asking you to follow steps that you wrote yourselves. You say to yourself, next week I'm going to get married, and I civil marriage, and I'm going to follow the dictates of those marriages. You blame me for saying, do what you said you should do. I mean, that's nonsense. And I'm looking for a very polite way to say that. When you make commitments to your people, when you make commitments to the international community, you better follow them. If you say to the international community you are not going to abduct your people, don't abduct your people. If you say you are going to rejoin the Commonwealth, then rejoin the Commonwealth. If you say you are going to repay your debts, then repay your debts. If you say you are going to free the media, free the media. Give them licenses. If you say you are going to give them TV licenses, don't do pseudo application. Why we are here and this station only has got an online license? It's because they didn't give it a TV license. The people whom they gave who are linked to the state can't even broadcast their own faces. Up to now, 6 months after they got the licenses. And people say, Inini, I should not point that out. No. And I should not put this government to its commitment that it put on black and white by itself. It's my fault that I'm telling it to do what it needs to do. That it said it will do itself. Nonsense. They should do what they commit to do as a civilized government. If they don't commit and if they don't follow what they said they will do, then there are consequences. There is no free lunch
but
in
not
this
as
world.
but not as a condition for the removal of sanctions.
Not condition. If you say to your people, I'm going to make you free, make us free. If you say you're going to give me
condition
water,
for the removal of sanctions.
I did not interrupt.
Can we get to a closing,
let me
please?
close.
Because
So,
we'll get tomorrow here.
I'm closing out. We must teach our governments that when they make commitments to their own people and they make commitments to the international community, they better stick to them. If you don't stick to them, then you have a challenge. Not only with the international community, but with your own people.
But
and
like
we want
in your case, this is
free talk. This is conclusion.
I wanted to say,
we cannot
can the MDC be sanctioned for failing to deliver in the Harare City Council? Can we say you are being sanctioned because you promised the people that you will do what you failed to do it? Can we say
we are starting a new debate. But allow us to.
So don't justify.
Allow me to close this
Sanctions
debate.
are bad. Corruption is bad. Don't justify it.
Let me.
Your friends, ZANU-PF suspended me 3 times. That's why I'm unable to do my job. They must stop suspending me.
Like what Linda said, you and me are responsible because we brought in the new dispensation. You marched for it, and we are in this problem together.
Yes.
Because
thank you very much. Thank you very. Thank you very much.
We caused this. Let's take responsibility.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for this amazing debate that we have had this evening here on Heart and Soul TV and radio. This is the free talk. Everybody was talking freely. Just before we close this, I just want to quote from Christopher Muchangwa, who's a member of the ZANU-PF Politburo. He says that this was the time that they were pushing Robert Gabriel Mugabe out of power. Chris Muchangwa said, when you see yourself blaming sanctions for failing to run this country and the prosperity of the people of this country, you have failed as a leader and you should vacate office. These are his words to President Robert Gabriel Mugabe when ZANU-PF wanted to push him out of power.
Thank you.
Today, things have changed. They are blaming the sanctions.
They must go out.
This is the free talk we all had. Sanctions are hurting the people of Zimbabwe. This was the general consensus that came out of this, including Jacob Mafume thinks sanctions are hurting the people of Zimbabwe.
No,
he says, but he says that even human rights and corruption are hurting the people of Zimbabwe. The causative agents should be looked into.
No, he didn't say that. He justified.
No, that's what he said. Because he actually said sanctions must go, but he said the causative issues must also go, and everybody else here said sanctions must go. Now, Zimbabweans, this is our nation. We also need prosperity. We also need better lives. We also need to sleep in our homes freely, without barricading our homes, thinking that some secret police or some secret society is going to break in and abduct kids for failing to find their father, beating up people in the streets. Just as we went to Bindura to the ZANU-PF conference, we met a group of ZANU-PF supporters in Grenary who were barricading the road, thinking that Nelson Chamisa was going to pass through. When we stopped, they tried to interview them. They wanted to beat us up because they thought we were a Chamisa press. I witnessed it firsthand. This is not the Zimbabwe that we want. We want better. We deserve better.
Sure.
Our leaders need to give us better. We are one people. We are one nation. Regardless of being ZANU-PF, MDC, EFF, FIZ, or the Purple Party here that we have, we all aspire for the same things. We are bound by a common cause, the boundaries of this country. Our tradition, we are one people. We are Zimbabweans. Let us build this country together. It is our country. We have no other country. Now, this was the Free Talk with me, your host, Dara Blessed Mhlanga, in proud partnership with the Frederick Newman Foundation and Heart and Soul TV and Radio. Until next time, thank you for choosing us as your station of choice. This was the Free Talk, proudly brought to you in proud partnership with the Frederick Newman Foundation and Heart and Soul TV and Radio. We believe that dialogue is the crux of development. When people talk to each other, when people listen to each other, development happens. On Free Talk, we believe in political dialogue, economic dialogue, and social dialogue. Everybody must be heard. Everybody has a right to be heard. Free Talk, talking that moves nation. Free Talk, talking that makes a difference. This is the Free Talk.
Chiwenga,